we're the faithful few on a Sunday night. But I believe that this applies to us anyway, and I believe that if we're going to do something, we ought to want to do our best. And if we are going to serve God, we ought to desire to absolutely serve Him in the best way possible. And so we're going to look at this thought here in Ecclesiastes chapter 5. And Solomon is saying that in chapter 1, he's kind of living now an older man. And I just have here at the front of my Bible in Ecclesiastes chapter 1, it's the lamenting of an old man. And so in Proverbs, we see the wisdom of a young man. In Song of Solomon, we see the love and the joy of a young man. In Song of Solomon, it's the joy of a young man. Proverbs, we see the wisdom of a middle-aged man. He's gained wisdom. And then here in Ecclesiastes, we see the lamenting of the older man. And so in chapter 1, he says there, in verse number 2 and 3, he says, "Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What profit hath a man of all his labor which he taketh under the sun?" And then verse number 14 in chapter 1, he says, "I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and vexation of spirit." And so he says, it's all emptiness. It all takes a lot of work for what? For nothing. And really, in what we can have and keep on this earth. Well, Solomon had gained riches. He had gained knowledge. He had pretty much anything a man could ever ask for or dream of and really desire to have. And so throughout the book of Ecclesiastes, he lays out all these things, that everything that a man can amass, everything that a man can have really proves to do nothing for him. It doesn't provide joy. It doesn't provide true happiness. It doesn't really make life worth anything. And so ultimately he ends Ecclesiastes saying it's our relationship with God, and it's God in us and that moving of God in our lives that really provides fulfillment in our lives. So in chapter 5, he comes to the place where he says there, notice in chapter 5, verse 1, he says, "Keep thy foot when thou goest to the house of God, and be ready to hear." And so he kind of starts talking about even our worship being that it can be in vanity. Our worship can be vain and good for nothing. And so we want to look at the fact that as Solomon addresses the believer's demeanor, our attitude in the church, and so we want to look at the idea of having proper worship. And so kind of wrestling with that idea is that, yes, I'm preaching it on a Sunday night. Yes, we are the faithful crowd. Probably most of us are involved in more than one ministry of the church, and we might say we're the backbone, but we don't want to allow that to get us to a place where we begin to think we're better than we are, or better than somebody else, or that it's not because of God's work in my life that I am who I am, that it's all of a sudden it's just me. And so I think this will be a reminder to us as well that we really need to be careful in our attitude in worship. And so I've simply entitled it Proper Worship. But let's read verses number 1 through 7, and then we'll kind of break this down as we go down through it. Chapter 5, verse 1, Ecclesiastes, he says, "Keep thy foot when thou goest to the house of God, and be ready to hear. Be more ready to hear than to give the sacrifice of fools. For they consider not that they do evil. Be not rash with thy mouth, and let not thine heart be hasty to utter anything before God. For God is in heaven, and thou upon earth. Therefore let thy words be few. For a dream cometh through the multitude of business, and a fool's voice is known by multitude of words. When thou vowest a vow unto God, defer not to pay it, for he hath no pleasure in fools. Pay that which thou hast vowed. Better is it that thou shouldest not vow, than that thou shouldest vow and not pay. Suffer not thy mouth to cause thy flesh to sin. Neither say thou before the angel that it was an error. Wherefore should God be angry at thy voice and destroy the work of thy hands? For in the multitude of dreams and many words there are also divers vanities, but fear thou God." Let's pray. Heavenly Father, Lord, we once again just bow before you, Lord, and it's just been a blessing, Lord, to be in church tonight and to hear the singing of your people, to be able to participate in that singing and to lift our voices before you, to reflect, Lord, on the fact that you could come back at any moment, and that we could be in your presence, Lord. And what a day that'll be. It'll be such a glorious time to look at your face and to be able to thank you for what you've done for us. But also, Lord, I believe that as Sunday school was a reminder to us this morning that we don't want to be ashamed that you're coming. We do want to be found busy doing your work, and we do want to honor you in our lives. Lord, so that when you do come back, we're found working, that we are found waiting and watching and busy. And Lord, I just pray that you help us as we look at these thoughts tonight, that you would draw our hearts closer to you. Help us, Lord, to move a little closer to you. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So he says there, keep thy foot when thou goest to the house of God. And I just wrote there, beware, be cautious in my Bible. The idea that I would guard my steps. And so, not that he's saying we shouldn't go into church or that we need to stay away, or if things aren't right that I don't go. He's saying go to church, but guard thy foot. Go with an attitude maybe of reverence, an attitude of caution, and understanding that this isn't just any other building, that the house of God's not just another place that we go in life. This is the house of God. And when we come here, the purpose isn't our purpose. It isn't our reason. We come here to worship God in accordance to His Word and His desires for us. And so church has become, we'll say here in a few minutes, it's become a big business. It's all about the buildings. It's all about the programs. It's all about the emotional status of the crowds, not about worshiping God. And so we need to understand that. And when we come in, he's saying, have your heart and mind prepared to serve God and to worship God in a right way. So it begs to ask the question, can our worship of God or our act of worship and the way in which we approach God be considered vanity and vexation? And Solomon's saying, yes, absolutely. We can get to a place where it becomes just a routine. It's just what I happen to do on a Sunday morning, a Sunday night, or a Wednesday night. It's just what I have grown up doing. And it no longer is to worship and serve God. And so we want to be careful with that. We don't want it to be vanity. We don't want it to be emptiness. We don't want it to become vexation of the spirit. Because when I'm not coming for the right reasons, it makes it hard to come to church. It makes it a drudge. I have to work myself to do it. And so when I do it in the spirit, it's a pleasure. I think yesterday morning, I tell myself, I just be honest with you and let you know I have the same feelings as you. We get out of the van to go on outreach, and I'm walking down the sidewalk. I did the first couple houses, and I'm just thinking, I really don't want to be out here. I don't know. I just wasn't in the right frame of mind, and I began to walk down the sidewalk praying, and the garage door was open. So I said, good morning, ma'am. How are you? Can I invite you to church and give you some things? She's like, nope, I'm not interested. All right, man, have a great day. And I walk away thinking, that's a kick in the pants, right? So I walk away and I'm like, Lord, I need your help. I need you to help me. And I would really enjoy just being able to speak to somebody. And so I do the next couple, and then there's a garage door open. There's a lady standing there. I walk up and say, good morning, ma'am. She says, good morning. How are you? And I said, thank you, Lord. And just that conversation and just really didn't have long conversation, but it just really changed my heart attitude. It changed me. And so several other people that I got to talk to, and one fellow I walked up and we shook hands, and he's like, thank you. Have a blessed day. And I just walked away thinking, if I would have stopped when I didn't feel like it, if I would have stopped when I got turned away the first time, I wouldn't have had the blessings of the next several people that I got to talk to. When we come into church and our heart's not right, I think that sometimes we just sit down and we're like, well, I'm here. And we miss out on the blessings because we just have this attitude that I'm here, let me just be here. And so we don't have the connection that we ought to have. We're not really paying attention. We're not in the spirit of worshiping God and doing it for the right purpose. And so we miss out on a lot of things. God's word, he says, is effectual, and it goes out and it has its purpose. But I think that we can lose out on our own self. We lose out on blessings when we're not in the right frame of mind when we come into God's house. And so he says there, when thou goest to the house of God. I think that we, first of all, just need to realize this is God's house. And I understand it's different in America. It's different in the times in which we live. But this is God's house. And where two or three are gathered together, God says, I'm in the midst of you. And so when we come here, we need to understand that God is here. And God wants to meet with us, and God wants to teach us something. So it's not about me. It's about God working in and through the service and to me. But ultimately that I'm giving him the honor and glory that he deserves. So in this day of where religion has become big business, we see that multitudes, I think many people, seek to find the meaning and purpose of life through religion. And maybe that religion is, I'm part of the Catholic Church, or I go to the Methodist Church, and the religion, the title, the denomination's what they're seeking, and they're part of that denomination. Maybe it's just the big church experience, because I go there and I get a little emotional, and the music is just what I'm looking for, and I can have a Starbucks while I'm sitting there, and it's really not an inconvenience. It's kind of, I enjoy it. And so that's what they're looking for. But through their own efforts, in order to approach God and to be accepted of Him, all they're getting is religion. They're not getting relationship. They're not going to truly worship God. And so the church or religion just becomes another option, just another thing to try to appease my spirit, or to make me feel better, or to relieve me from whatever problem that I have, rather than, again, truly seeking to worship and honor God. And I think that if we would think about every religion in the world requires that man earn or work his way to heaven. We do different things to earn favor with God. Okay? And so ultimately what I'm doing to earn favor with God is look at me, or look what I've done, look what I've given up, look at what I have done to become a better person. God must accept me now. So that mentality of working my way there, my mentality of doing enough good, really is putting the spotlight on me, rather than me humbly falling before God, seeking to honor and glorify Him, and ultimately allowing Him to bless me through what I'm doing. So even in many Christian circles, it's become all about God accepting us based on our own spirituality or our own works. And so we have to be careful with that. We don't want that to become our mentality either. Yes, as I've said after that one song, I want to be closer to God. My prayer is, yes, I would absolutely love for Him to come back tonight. But man, I would love to be more in love with Him when He comes back. I would love to be serving Him more when He comes back. But at the same time, man, I would love to be in His presence tonight. So you understand that, I think as Paul was saying, I press toward the mark. I don't feel like I've arrived yet. There's so much more I would like to be doing. Many more ways I would like to be serving the Lord. And so we need to be increasing and to be doing more. So although Christianity and all these religions are work-based, the one true God has come to us and offered us the free gift of eternal life through His Son. He's already done it. It's His finished work for our eternal salvation. And so we need to look at it in that light. If we have a relationship with Him, our worship of Him provides true meaning to life, as long as we are in fellowship with Him and worship Him with humble, earnest hearts. And I believe that's also what we've seen on our Wednesday night Bible studies in prayer. My humble attitude leads me to a desire to know more about Him. The more I know about Him, the more I fall in love with Him, the more I desire to know Him, just the sweeter that relation gets. And I begin again to grow, and that cycle just continues over and over. So our attitude and our conditions of prayer, we've been saying on Sunday night, is parallel to this. And so Solomon's point is clear, I believe, in here, that the worship of God is serious business, and we must worship Him on His terms rather than our own, if we are to glorify Him and fulfill our very purpose for existence. So let's look, number one. I just put the attitude in worship. We need to be careful of our attitude in worship. Notice again in verse 1, he says, keep thy foot. And this simply means to guard our steps, to watch our steps, watch our actions, and where we're going. Solomon is saying, be careful of your attitude in worship, the motives. And he's warning his readers to be prudent in their approach of God. That we need to understand who God is and how God works, and that He's given us His Word, and that He's laid out in the New Testament a pattern of our worship. So I ask, how do we guard our steps in worship? Well, I think first of all, we need to be in a proper house of God. He says there it is a house of God. And so if God was going to have a house on this earth, or where God was going to meet with His people, where would be a place that's going to honor Him? It's going to be a place like we have, a place that preaches and teaches God's Word, a place that honors Him with our music. It's a place that is careful in our worship and follows the biblical mandates for a New Testament church. He's not going to be in the churches that aren't preaching the Word of God. He's not going to be in meeting with the people that are teaching false doctrine. He's not going to be in a place that doesn't honor Him through the Scriptures and through the singing and those things. So we need to be in a good church. We need to be in a church that honors God and is truly glorifying to Him. So number two, though, although we're in that type of church, we need to be careful of ourselves. We need to be in a place where our own hearts, our own minds are in a proper place of worship. And so, lost my place. The place must be biblical, but we also must be ready. Notice verse number 2, where he says, "Be not rash with thy mouth, but let not thine heart be hasty to utter anything before God. For God is in heaven, and thou upon earth. Therefore let thy words be few." And so when I come in to worship God, it's not for me to be heard. It's not for me to be seen. It's not me to declare everything that I'm doing and going to do for God. It's for me to hear and to receive from God. And so one who loves to talk but fails to listen and be taught is a disgrace in God's sight and is headed for a fall. He says that pride comes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. And so when we come in and we're puffed up and we think that we already know, we've already arrived, God says you're ready for a fall. We need to come in humble. We need to come in seeking God's face and understanding that I haven't arrived. I haven't perfected this Christian life yet. And that as yesterday, I go through cycles where one time I absolutely love outreach and the next time I'm struggling. But allowing God, as we've said in our memory verse this week, teach me and lead me. And so in learning who God is, by praying and asking God, hey, I need help this morning, but then simply allowing Him to lead me, what's He do? He shows Himself faithful, and He blesses me through the several conversations that I got to have. One of them, and we don't make this a practice, we just go put stuff on doors. But one of them, the glass door was there, but the front door was open, and I saw a lady in there, and I'm like, I'm thinking, I'm like the missionary this morning, I'm standing there thinking, why did I do that? And here she comes. You know, but again, the blessing that God allows that conversation to go, she takes the information, she's listening intently to what I had to say, and I walked away thinking, I would not be surprised to see her one night this week. I don't know whether we will or not, but I'm just sharing with you the experiences that I had even as yesterday in my own life, that God works when we allow Him to teach and to lead us. I'm afraid, I think that even sometimes, my job becomes old hat. And, again, there's safety and there's different things that you're careful with, but at the same time, I've been doing it 18 years. Some things I just do because that's what I've been doing for 18 years. Sometimes the Christian life becomes the same way. I've been saved 18 more years, right? So it just becomes, no, we can't allow it to become that. We have to stay in fellowship. We have to understand I haven't arrived, and I need God just as much or more today than I realized I needed Him those 18, 19 years ago, the day I got saved. The difference is, remember that day you got saved and you're in love and you just, man, God loves me. He died for me. Wow. I want to know about this God. So we got into scriptures and we read them, wanting to know God and wanting God to talk to us and wanting to learn about God. But now I get up and, I'm in chapter 5 today. And I think how many times I go back and say, shame on me. I couldn't even tell you right now what I read. And we have to stop ourselves and go back. What is He telling me? What's in chapter 5 today? There's a purpose and there's a reason I'm in chapter 5 today. God has something for me. And to slow ourselves down and go back. And again, some of us hold each other accountable and we text one another, hey, this verse in this chapter was a blessing this morning. And then they'll send something back. And it just allows the Word of God to really work in your mind and to think about, what did I read this morning? Versus just blasting through it so that I can get it done today. And so, in the New Testament, the Apostle James exhorts us to refrain from thinking that we always need to be instructing everyone else. Look at James chapter 3 and verse 1. You can keep your hand in Ecclesiastes, but just look at James 3, verse 1 with me. James chapter 3, verse 1. James says, my brethren, again talking to Christians, fellow believers, he says, be not many masters, knowing that we shall receive the greater condemnation. I don't know about you, my heart's desire is to be as close to God as I can be, to know as much about the Bible as I can know, to know God as best I can. And when I hear a man like Dr. Rundle stand up this morning, and I know he's got a few years on me, he's got a few years of experience in ministry, but I listen to somebody like that and I say, man, to know the Bible like that, to be able to preach and to talk like that. But then I think and I say, you know, God worked in a process of time in his life, and God's working in a process of time in my life, and God has me where he wants me. God's brought me from where he had me, and only God knows where he'll take me. And the same is true for each of us. We can sit and say, man, I wish I was like that. I wish that I knew those things. But do you understand that God is working in a process of time in your life? God didn't send Jesus a minute too soon and not a minute too late. When God, in his eternal plan, knew that he would send Jesus to this earth to die on the cross, he knew exactly when he would do it. And it was exactly the right, perfect time that Christ descended from heaven, lived 3.5 years on this earth, and died on that cross. Not a minute before or after it should have happened. And so we simply need to understand. But in James 3:1, my brethren, be not many masters. And so in my desire to be and to know and to understand all that I can, I need to realize that with that comes responsibility. I think about my own 2 boys. Where I was raised, in the family that I had, I'm so thankful that somebody knocked on my parents' door and invited them to ride the church bus. And that through that, my parents got into church. And because of that, I am standing here today. But I look back and I say, now my boys are 3rd generation. Not only do they have grandparents on both sides that are saved and involved in church, they've got parents that are even more involved and more dedicated to the Lord. So what's that do to them? It adds a lot of responsibility. Because what I know, knowledge brings responsibility. And when I know something, I better be serving God with it. And that makes me responsible. So my brethren, be not many masters, knowing that we shall receive the greater condemnation. Is he saying that I should just sit over here and not desire to know anything? And no, keep that to yourself, Pastor. I don't want to know that because I don't want the responsibility. Absolutely not. We should be in church wanting to be like a sponge, taking in everything we can. Jason shared with me yesterday because of our Wednesday night study on prayer, and I said that it's like a plant going 2 ways. That communication, and I don't remember the names. But he sent me a science illustration that shows the nutrients come one way from the roots, and there's another part of the plant that brings things back from the leaves to the roots. So that plant is in 2 ways, getting and receiving and giving off nutrients, just like our relationship with God. But I opened up the illustration and it says, now the plant takes some things it doesn't need. It takes some waste and it takes it to the leaves and allows that to we might say off gas or go back into the atmosphere. It's not needed. And I thought about that yesterday driving home from outreach, is that God gives us so much. And we give and receive in that 2-way relationship. But like that sponge, I can only absorb so much. Like that plant, I can only take in so much. Some has to be given off. And our job is to go out and give off. Our job is to be, as the missionary said this morning, disciple makers. I can only keep so much in. I have to give to somebody else. My desire is to follow God in every step I can, to allow God to work in my life and to make me the greatest disciple I can be. But my responsibility then is to pass off what God has given to me and to make more disciples of Jesus Christ with the goal of them becoming disciple makers. And as he said, the cycle of the church, if we're going to be a disciple making or building church, we've each got to get serious about our walk with God and serious about being willing to put into somebody else. We have to share Christ with other people, and we have to bring them in and disciple, train, invest in them. And even the missionary letter tonight, he says that. The same verse we saw when we went through 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, that they invested in the people. And Paul says, so much so that I would give you whatever I had. I would do without so that you could understand Christ. I know that's way off of where we're But that's really what he's saying here. Take our walk with Christ seriously. When we come into church, it's not about me. It's about God. And when I realize it's about God, God will bless me. And in the long run, I'll look back and say, what a blessing. Because I wasn't looking for the blessing. I was looking to honor God. Go back to Ephesians chapter 5. So God's word is clear. Obedience to God and paying attention to his word are far superior than going through the motions of worship and sacrifice when our hearts are far from him. I just wrote down here this afternoon, looking over my notes again. It's one thing to be here in church. And thank you for your faithfulness. Thank you for being here. It's another thing to be here seeking to honor God. Seeking to get something from the Word of God so that I can go out and honor him more. It's one thing to just be present. It's something else being here present with the desire to absorb more and to be able to use that. So let's come to church seeking to learn so we can obey. We won't turn there. Probably we know it. 1 Samuel 15:22. God says that. Yeah, I'll turn there because. Sorry. 1 Samuel 15:22. He says there, for rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as the iniquity and idolatry. Because thou hast rejected the word of the Lord, he hath also rejected thee from being king. How many Christians will come to church? They'll sit through the service because that's what Christians do, but they're not absorbing. They're not here to gain information. They just do it because it's the routine. And God's saying that the rebellion is the sin of witchcraft. And again, that I'm not just a hearer of the word, but I'm a doer of the word. That I take it in with the purpose of using it and applying it in my life. And so the entire book of Malachi details the Israelites' hypocritical worship. God says, how have you robbed me? Or you've robbed me. And they say, how have we robbed you? God says, you don't worship me. How don't we worship you? Why? Because Israel was so ingrained in the tradition. Israel was so ingrained in the routine and bring the lambs and do these right and do this just according to how it's supposed to be done. But they lost the purpose in it. And we can too. Yeah, we can be at church and we can be on time, we can be early, but we can lose the purpose of it. And so we need to understand and be careful with that. And that's what he's saying in Ecclesiastes 5, verse 1. Keep thy foot, be careful, understand, guard the reasons when thou goest to the house of God. Be more ready to hear than to give the sacrifice of fools, for they consider not that they do evil. That parallels 1 Samuel 15:22. God says, I'd rather have your heart, I'd rather have a right motive, I'd rather have your love and service than that you give me lip service and don't love me with your heart. So, again, in the New Testament, the Pharisees were prime examples of those whose hearts were far from God, yet they considered themselves justified by their works. And so we understand that the Pharisees were all about the traditions of men, and this is how we do it, and this is how we teach. And yet they didn't have time for the Messiah himself. They couldn't stand him, and they were part of the system, the religious people that put him to death. The proper attitude in worship in a biblical house of God, again, according to verse 7, is having that fear of God. And notice he says, in the multitude of dreams and many words, there are also divers vanities, but fear thou God. And again, he hit this morning as well, in this thought that I don't stand and quake in the presence of God, yet I have such a reverence for God that when I come into church, I want to honor him. I want to please him through my worship. I want to be in a right frame of mind with God. And so the proper attitude is that I would have a fear of God. And when I enter the house of God, if I truly fear him, everything I do will be about him. It'll be about worshiping him and honoring him rather than me and what I get out of it. Number 2, we need to be careful with our words in worship. And we already read there, verse number 2, he says, be not rash with thy mouth. Let not thy heart be hasty to utter anything before God. For God is in heaven and thou upon earth. Therefore let thy words be few. And so words are powerful. They carry meaning. We communicate through them. Again, we talk to one another. We talk to God with that. But Solomon exhorts us in verse 2 to let our words be few as we engage in the worship of God. And I think that one reason that maybe he admonishes us this way is today we talk freely to God. We don't go to the temple, and we don't have a priest that takes our sacrifices and all that. We don't go to the Catholic Church and talk to a priest who intercedes. We have Jesus Christ who intercedes for us. And so we're told that we can come boldly before the throne of grace. Look in Philippians 4:6 with me. Philippians 4 and verse number 6. God desires that we bring our cares and our concerns to Him. He says in Philippians 4:6, be careful for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your request be made known unto God. And one more, look at 1 Peter 5 and verse number 7. 1 Peter 5, verse 7. 1 Peter 5:7, he says, casting all your care upon Him, for He careth for you. And so that casting all your care, that word care is all your anxieties, all your worries, all those things that bother you, cast them on Him, for He careth for you. So when we come to verse number 2 in Ecclesiastes 5, he says, be not rash with your words, be careful with your words. But then we hear verses in the New Testament where he's saying, cast your care, be careful for nothing. We have access to the throne of God. We have the ability to go straight to God. But yet we have caution that we need to understand that God is God. And we need to understand we're accountable for our words. I think the idea, and two, is that Solomon is not advising his readers maybe to restrict or lessen their communication with God. Just like we said at the beginning, my idea is not that I don't go to church when I watch my steps. Well, I don't want to be held accountable. I don't want to be responsible, so I won't go. That's not the idea. The idea is not that I don't share the gospel with other people. The idea is that I'm careful, that I understand I'm accountable for what comes out of my mouth. So when there's a pastor that is high pressure, high emotion, and I make commitments to God out of emotion, right? I better be careful. Notice that he says there, when thou vowest, verse number 4, when thou vowest a vow unto God, defer not to pay it, for he hath no pleasure in fools. Pay that which thou hast vowed. Better is it that thou shouldest not vow than that thou shouldest vow and not pay. God's not saying that we shouldn't vow to God. God's not saying we shouldn't make commitments. But God's saying that when you do it out of a right heart, a heart that is communicating with me, and then keep those vows. It's a reminder to us, I think, of some of our missions giving, our commitments to our missionaries, our commitment to what we give to God. When we commit to those things, we ought to pay it no matter what. And my thought is that if I make a commitment out of emotion because somebody's up here saying you need to give, and give more than you gave last year, that can be foolish. Don't do it out of emotion. But when God has blessed you, and God lays on your heart to give this amount, go with God. If He tells you to do it, do it. Now, when I run into hard times financially, and I trust God that He'll continue to give it to me, God will give it to me. But when I, out of emotion and out of a foolish decision, because somebody high-pressured me, and I did something I probably knew I shouldn't, now I put myself in a bad position. So, you understand? Does that make sense? I'm not saying we shouldn't make commitments and that we shouldn't give to God and we shouldn't commit to giving to missions. But do it in a relationship and in fellowship and in communication with God. And when God gives you a number, when God lays on your heart a missionary and a certain amount to give to them, come what may, do that. Keep that commitment. But don't do it out of emotion when some pastor's up here, you can give more than you gave last year. Maybe I can, but maybe you can't. Maybe you can, but I'm not in the position to do it. But if I allow that emotion to draw me in, I can make foolish commitments. Because I'm communicating with emotion to some man, not in fellowship with God Almighty. Does that make sense? So, for us, again, my heart is, we are the church. We are the ones that will be here Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. But we want our hearts to be right with God. And these are things that we can be drawn into, or we get a moment of weakness, or we kind of fall into these traps of emotion. And so we need to understand how cautious we need to be. This is God's house. God meets with his people here. We need a heart's desire to meet with God just as much. And we need that two-way communication so that we make right decisions with our words, with our feet, our actions, our attitudes, all need to be in tune with God. God is in heaven. He knows. He hears what we say. He understands our heart attitude. We're on earth. So the words we speak before other people are important as well. To be a person who loves to perpetually talk is a problem. We need sometimes to just stop and listen and allow those times of quiet. Allow God to speak. And so likewise, there are times when our minds are busy and we're thinking and there's just constant chatter. And we have no time to allow God to talk to us. And you know, there's good and bad in the way we do different things. But there used to be a reverence when people came into church and they sat and there was quiet. And there was a time of preparation to allow God to just prepare our hearts, get our minds thinking on God. Yes, man, I absolutely love the fellowship, but there's a time for that. There's a time when we just need to quiet ourselves before God and allow him to communicate to us, not the constant noise. So the Bible reveals that there's foolish people who want to be heard and seek to set everyone else straight. I'm sure if you've been in church long, you know those people. But we don't want to be that. We want God to speak, and we want to allow God to use us. And the third thing, just quickly, is our service and worship. According to verse 4, he says there, when thou vowest a vow unto God, defer not to pay it. And so the fool is the man who boasts about what he plans to do. He talks about what he's got great plans in these things, and then he never follows through. He never does those things. And so many today vow vows one after another and never have an intention to keep those things. And again, some of it comes by pressure. Some of it comes because of the atmosphere, the people we're around. But we need to be careful not to make vows to God that we don't plan to keep. And so I think in closing, I would say the ritual without a sincere heart is vain. It's all vanity. And that's what Solomon's telling us. He's cautioning us in our worship. That worship involving much talk and self-focus, self-promotion is vain. And that is Christianity today. That is the majority of our churches out there. Self-focus, self-promotion, feel good, high emotion, but you walk away empty and vain. Religion involving personal dreams and revelations, again, is vanity. All these people claiming to be apostles and having revelations and stuff, it's not Bible. The Bible says that God gave us the revelation right here. And he's not talking to people the way he did in the Old Testament. And when we got Scripture, he gave us everything we need. We have the mind of God. So the only thing that is truly honoring to God is to glorify him through a sincere relationship with him, whereby he is reverenced and glorified according to his word alone. So that's where we need to be in our worship. And I think that's what Solomon is cautioning us. A man who had everything, who amassed riches, wisdom, anything you can imagine, is looking back on it saying, worship of God without true heart is nothing. It's vanity. Let's pray. Lord, I thank you for the evening, and thank you again for time.